Good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Wilson, and I am the Congregational Life Coordinator here at First Universalist Church of Rochester. If this is your first time here, or maybe even your second or third time here, we especially welcome you this morning. Thank you for making it to our worshiping community. You belong because you are here. We invite you to remain after the service for a coffee hour, whether you're in person or online, for additional connection and fellowship. I kind of like to think of it as the other side of our church service. If you'd like to learn more about our church, be more involved, or receive our hybrid worship emails, there is a visitor form on the back of your order of service that you can fill out and turn in during our offertory. If you're online, you can also click the link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code on the back of the order of service as well. If you're looking to be part of our welcoming ministry and to help nurture our spirit and serve our immediate community, we invite you to join our coffee hour team. So MJ Curry, who's smiling, waving her hand right there in the middle, would definitely welcome you to the coffee hour team. We also have opportunities for greeters and ushers, so you can see Shirley or Grant, who are here with us today. Or you can see me afterwards if you have any interest in helping us to launch an LGBTQ social justice circle, something we're pondering and trying to get off the ground. Before we take a moment to turn to our neighbor here, let's take a moment and offer a greeting and a wave to our online community. So if you want to wave back towards the Progress Pride flag there. We are definitely welcoming you and happy you're here as we're all waving to you this morning. And for those here in person, now is the time to turn towards our neighbor and offer a greeting.
I'm Bill Schubmel, and I'm honored to be your worship associate on this last Sunday of June. I am one of the luckiest people in the world, and yet I have post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of being abused by my father. I'm sharing this as an expression of trust in all of you in this safe sanctuary, and because with several years of therapy, I've put what happened in perspective. I lived in fear of this tyrant, even years after leaving home. I believe this abuse contributed to my anxiety disorder, struggles at school, low self-esteem, and relationship issues, including how he set such a horrible example of what it means to be a husband and a father. I'm the 6th oldest in a family of 11. For most of my life, I kept the worst episodes of abuse to myself, not even sharing them with the siblings I was close to or with my wife. However, in 2014, the year I turned 60, I wrote a letter to all of my siblings and told them about the abuse and how it had impacted my life. All but the two oldest responded with compassion, support, and validation. My 3 brothers closest to me in age shared similar experiences with our father. One said, "I could have written the same letter," and the other said, "I'm proud of you for writing that letter." Initially, I believe my 2 oldest siblings were angry at me. Their experiences with our father were mostly positive, and they felt that he loved them and was proud of them. If I didn't feel the same way, there must be something wrong with me, not with how I was treated. It took several years, but eventually, both of them acknowledged and validated the abuse. Despite the abuse, as I said earlier, I consider myself one of the luckiest people in the world. My mother was wonderful and did her best to compensate for the abuse. I know that most of the patients I worked with as a therapist suffered far more in their childhoods compared to mine. Also, some of the memoirs that I've read, for example, Finding Me by Viola Davis, describe such horrific abuse that my experiences pale by comparison. I have good support from most of my siblings. I have the most wonderful wife and daughters in the world, and I have the good fortune to be a member of this church. Come, let us worship together. As Jay Jocelyn comes forward to light our chalice at First Universalist, and you light a chalice in your own home, please join me in our chalice lighting words spoken in unison. May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please rise in body or in spirit for our affirmation of faith, followed by our sung offering. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. Held together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship. to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. Being connected to First Universalist is certainly good for your spiritual growth, but it's also good for your mental health. In addition, our church is a good source for information about how to make a difference in dealing with the fascist government that seems intent on doing anything but making America great again. Thank you for that. So, in order to maintain our safe sanctuary, our spiritual home, our church depends on your generosity to keep our compassionate, vibrant church moving forward. Please place your offering in the offering basket or give online by scanning the QR code on the back of your order of service. This is also a great time to place visitors' forms in the offering basket. For folks online, please click the link in the chat to give to First Universalist Church. Thank you for your generosity. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received.
Each Sunday morning, we take time with each other for the sharing of joys and concerns. When we share with one another our personal highs and lows, we enlarge our circle of love and strengthen our caring for one another. I invite you into this sacred time where we share what's in our hearts and on our minds. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart so that you will be able to listen from a heart-centered place. We know so very much is going on in our world today, and if you have sorrows to share or joys to share on behalf of our national global community, you are truly encouraged to do so today and in the future. As Bill places stones into a bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All that are online are also invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. A sorrow from Juanita Ball. With great disappointment, I learned that less than 30% of registered Democrats voted last Tuesday. From Ezekiel McGee, we are now sharing, oh, something went away. Okay. Joy from Susan Reedy, joy to be able to share in this caring community online. From Johanna, I am moving to St. John's Meadows independent apartment. From John Lukes, a joy that we have some sunlight today. And from Johanna, moving day for me is August 5th. Many unspoken concerns and celebrations live in the heart, and we recognize each of them even as they are offered in silence. In a moment, those here in person are invited to come forward and drop stones into the bowl. If you need to remain seated, please raise your hand, and someone will come to you with a bowl to drop the stones in. If you are joining us online, please use your reactions buttons to indicate a heart, and please place a heart into the chat. Let us join together in this collective ritual of honoring the joys and sorrows of all of us. Now the circle of our care is drawn larger. May it increase forevermore. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the strains of compassion. Oh, in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the I actually learned the importance of Spirit of Life from an Episcopalian. When I was at Colgate Rochester Divinity School, my worship professor, Carol Doran, said to us, every denomination needs a hymn that when they hear that hymn, they say to themselves, ah, this is my church, this is my group, I'm home. And for Unitarian Universalists, that hymn is Spirit of Life. So as I believe I've mentioned before, my partner Michael and I went to Cuba in 2017. We went on an educational tour with some organic farmer friends. And so I toured a lot of organic farms in the 6 days that we were there. And despite the fact that I am not a farmer or a plant person, I did find the farms very interesting, and the farmers were very inspirational. What I learned was that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cuba stopped receiving its shipments of seeds and fertilizers and farming equipment that the Soviets had always sent them. And because of the long-standing U.S. embargo, they couldn't import any of these things from other countries either. And so Cubans were forced very quickly to adopt small-scale organic farming as an absolute necessity for their survival. The Cuban people, with their signature resilience and amazingly adaptive nature, quickly transformed themselves into global experts in organic farming. So if you're interested in organic farming, I highly recommend a trip there. We had the opportunity to see firsthand what a truly grassroots effort can accomplish when circumstances are compelling enough. It was a wonderful trip, and we still cherish our memories from that trip. And since relatively few Americans have been to Cuba, we get asked a lot, what is Cuba like? If I am being completely honest, I have to answer, I really don't know. And this is true, because while yes, we did indeed spend 6 days there, we spent them being escorted around in a sanitized bubble of privilege. When we stepped off the airplane, the first thing I noticed is the Havana airport was like no other airport I had ever been to in my life. There were no coffee kiosks, no gift shops, no restaurants, no duty-free shop. And there was simply an open space that was teeming with people clamoring around in a chaotic manner, searching for loved ones and clamoring to find rides. There was also no air conditioning, and so on this 85-degree July day, it was pretty hot in there. So we were just getting our bearings when all of a sudden I spotted someone holding up a rough piece of cardboard with the name of our group handwritten on it. Our tour guide, Santiago, was waiting for us to whisk us past all the chaos and all the poverty into a brand new air-conditioned minivan with our own private driver. He was waiting for us in the parking lot with chilled bottles of water to take us to the place where we were staying. Now, this van was by far the nicest vehicle in the parking lot. What they say about the cars in Cuba is true. About half the cars on the streets of Havana are from the 1950s, and they're held together by a combination of necessity and ingenuity. Cuban vehicles are often hybrids of a completely different nature than our hybrid vehicles are. You might see one where the front of a 1957 Chevy and the back of a 1956 Ford are welded together. After 70 years of continuous use, nearly all of these cars are kind of a hodgepodge of spare parts. You could see odd-sized steering wheels. I saw some handmade wooden dashboards, and I saw a couple of seats in the cars that were made out of sofas. They often lack working headlights, and at night you might see one of them cruising down the road with a kerosene lantern hanging from the grille. And then the remainder of the cars that you see are dull, little boxy Soviet-era Fiats from the 1970s and 1980s. And yet, in the midst of all of these rickety makeshift vehicles, we were ferried around in a brand new air-conditioned Hyundai minivan. So we left the airport, and we were driven to a high-rise apartment building where we stayed in a nice 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. They do a version of Airbnb in Cuba, and the nicest homes are rented out to tourists. We were on the 12th floor, we had a balcony and a gorgeous view of the Caribbean. Our tour guide and our private chauffeur were with us every day, right from after breakfast until bedtime. With the exception of one evening, they went everywhere with us. We were served nice meals in restaurants that are reserved for tourists. This is because there are essentially, as many of you probably know, there are essentially two economies in Cuba, a tourist economy and a resident economy. There are literally even two currencies, one for locals and one for tourists. And this means that there are different businesses as well. Nice ones for tourists and pretty shaky ones for the locals. The whole time we were there, we were only taken to businesses that catered to the tourists. So unlike trips that I've taken to Europe and Japan and other places, we had no opportunity to visit a Cuban grocery store or a pharmacy, and we never sat with Cuban citizens in a cafe or a restaurant. Everything was separate and most definitely not equal. The tourist restaurants served food that the Cuban citizens could not even hope to afford to buy. All of the best food in Cuba, I have learned, is reserved for the tourists, leaving the Cuban people little but beans and rice and vegetables. Meat is considered a rare treat for the locals, and yet we were literally served meat at every single meal the whole time we were there. And we were served by people who could not afford to buy this food themselves. And so, while yes, we did visit Cuba, yes, we were there, but we were not there at the same time. We saw Cuba in much the same way that you visit those historic homes, you know, the ones where you walk through a couple of carefully curated rooms on the little carpet, and there are ropes on both sides so that you can see into the room, but you can't actually move through the room freely or touch anything. That's kind of what it was like. We were really only able to experience the real Cuba on one evening. For some reason, we had one evening on our own where we had to fend for ourselves. And so the small group that we were with, we decided to walk a few blocks down the street and have dinner at a restaurant. We had walked about a half a block when we were approached by a man who clearly had spotted us as tourists. "Please," he said, "please come to my house. My wife will cook you dinner. It will be much better than anything you will get in a restaurant."
Louis wants to go in, or?
We encountered several people just in this short little walk offering to sell us goods and services, and it only took about 5 minutes to get to the destination, and we were probably stopped 6 times. We learned later that by law, the Cuban citizens are not actually allowed to approach tourists like that, and they never did that once while we were with our tour guide. And the tour guide had warned us that we should never go with anyone like the man who offered to cook us dinner, because that might not be safe. It was quite an eye-opening experience. Just that short little walk was quite an eye-opening experience. It was my only experience ever in a so-called third world country, and it's an experience I believe every American should have. My experience in Cuba is very much, I think, a good metaphor for what the American experience is like in general. To a degree that I think most of us are unaware of, we live in a carefully curated bubble of heavily defended privilege. And I think in many ways, in a very true sense, we don't really live in the real world. Not only that, but we are actually not safe in most of the rest of the world because our incredible privilege makes us easy targets for thieves and kidnappers. And this is why the U.S. State Department maintains a list of nations and regions that they deem unsafe for Americans to visit. And thus, when most of us travel abroad, myself included, we go to places like Western Europe or Japan or other tourist-friendly, American-friendly destinations. Most of us truly do go through our entire lives in sanitized bubbles of privilege, getting maybe occasional glimpses of what lies outside our bubble, but even then only in carefully curated situations in which we are insulated from actually fully being there. Yes, we hear about starvation and plagues and governmental coups. We hear about that in the news, but we hear about it from the safety of our privileged bubbles, insulated by our wealth, isolated by vast oceans, and guarded by our mighty military. But, much to our horror and dismay, that may finally be changing. One of the unintended but likely consequences of the second Trump presidency is that our privileged bubble may very well pop. And for the first time in our lives, we may join the real world. This unwelcome reality seems closer with every news cycle, doesn't it? We are being barraged with bad news on all fronts. The economy may be about to tank thanks to the tariff threats, and because we have embarked on an unprecedented mission to alienate all of our staunchest allies. We had an unelected and unaccountable billionaire and a president with authoritarian ambitions destroying the rule of law on a daily basis. We face the real possibility that Social Security might not function, leaving millions of people literally at risk for homelessness and starvation. It's as if we are living out a script from a dystopian movie. So many things that we would have thought impossible, absolutely unthinkable, are not only possible, but some of them are probable. We may indeed be about to experience a measure of what life is like in Cuba. New, previously unimagined levels of abject poverty for many people, combined with isolation from the outside world, and a severe curtailment of our civil liberties. As unbelievable as this would have been to imagine even a year ago, this, I believe, is truly where we find ourselves this morning. It's as shocking as it is terrifying. And I dare say that even those of us who feared this and saw it coming are having trouble coming to terms with the reality of what it really looks like. And we haven't really even experienced the effects yet. As of today, I would say our bubble is largely still intact. But if we are being honest and if we are being realistic, the time has come to fully accept and embrace the possibility that this bubble could burst at any time. As many of you know, I preach in the UURoc church during the school year, and normally I operate under the assumption that I can preach the same sermon there that I preach here. If I write one for one congregation, I often use the same one in another. So I wrote a version of this sermon this morning when I preached there in April, and at the time, in that sermon, I said to them that I thought it was entirely possible that the bubble would have burst by the time I was preaching the message here, and that I would have to make heavy modifications to the message by June. I truly believe that that is the reality of the unprecedented moment we are finding ourselves in right now. Now, this may seem like too dire a prediction from the pulpit of a church that serves as a beacon of comfort and hope to all who enter. But I believe, and I've always believed this very strongly, that the most important step we must take if we hope to bring about transformation is to take the scary leap into total acceptance. Acceptance of the reality that we're in. Now, people often get mad at me when I say that we have to accept things, that it's important to accept everything as it is. However, they are confusing acceptance with capitulation when they get upset with me. They assume that what I'm saying is, well, this is how it is and we can't do anything about it, so we must just accept it. What I'm actually saying is much different. What I mean to say is this, that unless we can fully engage the present reality that we are in without any illusion, and really face it without any kind of denial, then we can't truly be effective agents for change. So what does a lack of acceptance look like in this present moment? Well, I think here are some examples. See if any of these sound familiar. I could move to Europe if it gets bad enough here. I may not live long enough to really feel the effects of what's happening. I've got investments, so I could get by without Social Security if I needed to. The Democrats are going to figure out a way to stop all of this. The courts will eventually rule against the tyrants. I'm just going to stop following the news. We live in a blue state. This will shield us from the worst effects of what's going on. So I'm going to share that I have personally had each and every one of these thoughts myself since Election Day. But what becomes clearer and clearer to me with each passing day is that I can't truly take refuge in even one of these thoughts, at least not for more than a few minutes. It is quite possible that every single one of these comforting thoughts will end up being an illusion, and that I may very well end up feeling the full effects of the tyranny that prevails at this moment in history. And while, yes, this is scary and anxiety-producing on the one hand, it's empowering and incredibly enlightening on the other hand. Because if I can fully engage and accept the reality of the moment that I'm in, I will be much better able to see what needs to be done, and I will be much more motivated then to go on and do it. And I will also be better prepared for the hardship I might face. My mother was very fond of the old proverb, "It's an ill wind that blows no good." And we have all seen the truth of this statement borne out in our lives. No matter how unpleasant or even devastating some events may be, something good always arises from the adjustments that must be made in the aftermath. If we are honest, and let's be really honest, our country has been on the wrong track for at least 40 years or more. Greed and naked self-interest have driven new and dangerously high levels of inequality, not just in this country, but all over the globe. Our privilege bubble is not self-sustaining. It exists at the expense of literally billions of our fellow human beings all over the planet, who, like the people of Cuba, are denied food and other resources because we gobble them all up. Our bubble exists at the expense of millions of other species and habitats all over the world that we destroy and plunder. It exists at the expense of our ecosystem itself. A course correction in our current unjust and unsustainable trajectory is not only extremely welcome, but it is urgently necessary. And unfortunately, history has taught us that big, important, and necessary change is never the result of happy, contented people voluntarily banding together to make sacrifices for the greater good. Human nature does not work that way. Unfortunately, we all, myself included, enjoy our bubbles too much to voluntarily pop them. And instead, as we see with the people in Cuba, the kinds of sacrifices that are necessary to bring about real systemic change have to be foisted upon us by forces too powerful to resist. Now, this is not to say that I'm happy about what's been happening or that I agree with any of it, but I do believe that at least some of it is inevitable. And as a spiritual person, I live with an abiding faith in possibility and the resilience of the human spirit and the boundless, boundless love of the human heart. For just as I am certain that some very rough days lie ahead of us, I am equally certain that we are as strong and as resilient as the people of Cuba. And that, like them, we will not just endure, we will thrive, we will acclimate, we will innovate, we will advocate. We will find new strength and safety in numbers as we work together cooperatively with the new urgency of necessity, a necessity that we've never felt before. Like most of us raised Catholic during the baby boom era, I heard the nuns and priests admonish us all the time to offer it up as a sacrifice. They would tell us that whenever something bad happened to us, offer it up as a sacrifice. You might sprain your ankle or suffer the loss of a pet, and you would be told to offer it up as a sacrifice. In the specifically Catholic context in which I heard it, it meant intentionally giving something, even a small inconvenience or a significant suffering, to God, uniting it with Christ's sacrifice for the good of oneself and of others. Excuse me. As an armchair Buddhist, I see this in slightly different terms. I see it as a way to deepen our empathy and our compassion. We all have an easier time feeling another person's pain when we felt it ourselves. And this is why therapists are warned to police themselves for countertransference, which means that a therapist might possibly have an unconscious emotional reaction to a client if they themselves have experienced the same problem or trauma that the client is presenting with. And in therapy, this can be a problem because it can interfere with the therapist's objectivity and thus hinder the client's progress. But in everyday life and in the larger world, being able to feel another's pain is an incredible gift, which leads to compassionate hearts and open minds. I didn't truly understand this until I experienced it for myself, as that is how most learning happens. Like so many of us, one of the most painful experiences I ever had was the first time I had my heart broken. Everybody take a minute to think back, because we've all had our heart broken at least once. What did that feel like? How were you feeling? I was in college, after all, isn't that where it usually happens? And the pain that I endured was so severe it nearly derailed my entire life. It all started one evening when I met my friend Tracy for dinner, and she introduced me to her friend Paul. Paul was instantly taken with me to an extreme degree that made me a little bit uncomfortable, and one of those whirlwind sweep you off your feet romances ensued. His level of intensity actually scared me, a little bit at least. How was it possible that he could be this enamored of someone that he had just met? But I was young and I hadn't dated much, and I assumed that this must be how it was when you meet the one. And so, after a few weeks, I just gave in completely to the experience. There was a part of me all along that was saying to myself, this seems really too fast. But like most 22-year-olds, I decided to ignore that voice and just enjoy being in love. Now that I have considerable more wisdom and life experience than I did then, I can see clearly that the part of me that sensed that something wasn't quite right was the wise part of me. And I now see that the extreme and instant intensity that Paul had was a harbinger of what was to come, a warning sign that I should have heeded. After 3 months or so, just as suddenly as he had met me and swept me off my feet, and had decided that he couldn't live without me, he decided he was done. I had just about reached the point where I had decided that that part of me that sensed that something was off and something was mistaken and that I shouldn't trust this, I had finally just decided to not listen to that part. And then the whole thing ended as abruptly as it started. He didn't even break up with me in person. Have anyone ever had that? He just called me on the phone one night while I was waiting for him to come over and announced that he had had a change of heart. We could still be friends, but that was it. He needed to move on. Oh, and he couldn't talk very long because he had to be someplace. So most of us have been there. So I probably don't have to go into too much detail about how I felt. We all know that feeling. We've all had that feeling. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I almost flunked out that semester. I couldn't think about anything else. And I had to change all of my routines to avoid seeing him on campus. I had to start eating in a different dining hall at a different time, changing my route around campus so that I wouldn't run into him, avoiding going past his apartment, which was hard to do because it was right on the main street where you had to go all the time. My friends got tired of trying to cheer me up and wondered why I didn't just get over it. It took an incredibly long time. We only dated from November to March, but it was probably October, honestly, before I started to feel like my normal self again. And I can still dredge up those feelings 40 years later. We probably all can, right? We dig into our hearts and remember that experience, and those feelings come right back. But it was the next winter that I truly saw for the first time how our own pain deepens our compassion. Chris, who was a casual friend of mine, had been dating a young man named Tony, and most of the time when I saw Chris, Tony was with him. They seemed quite happy together, and I never really thought much about them until one evening the group got together, and Chris was there by himself. He looked awful, and I could tell that he had been crying a lot. And somehow I just knew. Even before another member of the group filled me in, I just knew that Tony had broken up with him. I looked at Chris's face, and I just knew. I knew not only what happened, but more importantly, I knew how he was feeling. I approached him, and he burst into tears. I reached out to hug him, and he buried his face in my shirt and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. My shirt was soaked through with his tears by the time he stopped. And the entire time he sobbed, I was just feeling this deep, deep, strong resonance with his experience. I knew exactly how he was feeling. And even though Chris and I were not terribly close friends, I felt this enormously strong need to help him as much as I possibly could. It felt different than the other times in my life that I had felt concern for other people. It felt as if I were suffering right along with him. Over the next few weeks, I had unlimited amount of time and energy for Chris. I started checking in with him every day, and I never tired of having the same conversation over and over again. His pain was truly my pain, and I felt compelled to be there as much as I possibly could be. I wanted to do anything that I could do to alleviate that pain, because I knew what that pain felt like. It is likely that, yes, there was some counter-transference going on at the time. He and I were both young gay men, and we had had the same experience, so there was a lot that I could identify with. But ever since that time that I resonated on that deep level with another person's pain, I feel like I'm better able to feel another person's pain even when their circumstances are nothing like mine. And it was also this experience that allowed me to find meaning in the advice that the nuns had always given me about offering things up as a sacrifice. To me, that means that we use our own pain and our own difficult experiences to deepen our compassion for other people. I found that I was transformed in a small way, at least, by my connection to the suffering of another person. But in order for that to happen, I had to endure my own measure of suffering first. I think that's how life works. I am an optimist by nature. And I always truly do look for the lesson in my suffering when something bad happens. And like so many of us, I have been suffering since Election Day for good reason. Our bubble is bursting. So many protections and safeguards that we always accepted as immutable are now being threatened. We are experiencing what most people on the planet experience. Think about that for a moment. That is what most of the people on this planet experience. The vast majority of the human family live under some form of either repressive or completely non-functioning government. So right now, in this moment, we could despair. We could ignore and turn our backs. We could get angry. Some kind of anger is good. We could do those things, or we could embrace the fact that we are being given an opportunity to strengthen our understanding and our compassion for other people who are not as fortunate as we are. And even though, yes, we are fighting our own battle, keep in mind and never lose sight of the fact we are still some of the most privileged people who have ever walked the earth. We can offer our suffering up as a sacrifice by deepening our compassion and our understanding. Now, I'm not going to pretend that the road ahead is not going to be difficult and that we're not going to suffer. But I am going to say that our suffering can be transformative if we offer it up as a sacrifice in solidarity with all of the billions of people who suffer horribly all over the globe. In many ways, we are long overdue for a reckoning with reality. And it is my sincere and fervent hope that we are about to endure something that will deepen our compassion, transform our souls, and spur us to ever greater senses of justice. Maybe when we really feel it ourselves, we will act in new and bold ways, and the result will be a more just and peaceful world. Maybe it's time that some of our own sacrifice will bring about, in the long run, more justice for more people. And if that's the case, I'm willing to offer it as a sacrifice. As each new indignity is heaped upon us, let us all pause and remind ourselves that we are simply experiencing for the first time what billions of people in other nations experience every day their whole lives, and have experienced as long as they can remember. So I have a little bit of a challenge for everyone here this morning. Let us begin to consciously poke little holes in our own bubbles and unite in solidarity with those who have never, ever had the luxury of bubbles themselves. One of the things that struck me in Cuba, and I've heard this from other people who have visited other places like Cuba, was just how incredibly vibrant and strong people's connections were with one another. It was palpable, and it was so uplifting that I almost wished that I lived there myself. I almost thought that it might be worth giving up all of my material privilege to have this deep sense of solidarity and connection that is born out of dwelling more intimately with the realities of living than any of us probably have ever had to. Is it possible that maybe some of this won't be a sacrifice at all? So we need to be vigilant, and we need to be willing to stand up against what is happening. Yes, I am certainly not saying that. But if we don't succeed every time and win every single battle, we have billions of people to stand in solidarity with. And perhaps leveling this playing field will prove to be painful but necessary, a necessary sacrifice which will lead to a much more just global society. That is my prayer, and that is my hope. Please remain standing as Bill extinguishes our chalice flame this morning, and let us read together the words printed on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice. taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. As we close our service this morning, I invite you to place a hand over your heart. If you are joining us online, I invite you to turn your settings to gallery view and look upon the faces of those who have been here with you this morning. And for those of us who are here in this room, let us take a moment to look around at all of the beautiful people we have shared this experience with today. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace seeking justice. I mean go in peace committed to equal rights and opportunities for each and every person. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce and unrelenting love. And to this, may we say together, Amen. I invite everyone to join us for coffee in the Clara Barton Lounge immediately after the service.